If our goal is to play music and not just practice music, it only is successful if we are being playful. I'm calling this video Guitar Creativity Tips, but the creativity advice in this episode applies to absolutely anyone. So if you're watching this and you're not a guitarist, just take any of the guitar or music related ideas and apply it to your interest, and you're going to get a lot out of this. Creativity can be improved with practice. That's the bottom line here. That's what we're going to get into. We're going to talk about how that's possible and specifically how to work on it. The challenge that a lot of people in my orbit face, the guitar students, the challenge that I see over and over again is a student who maybe has gained a lot of knowledge or some amount of maybe theory knowledge or skills, some sort of playing skills, but struggling with how to use that information creatively. Okay, I have these skills. Okay, I have this knowledge. How do I use it creatively? So I hear this as a challenge quite a bit. It's not an easy thing to answer, which is why I'm doing a big deep dive video on it. I taught guitar lessons privately for 20 years, and solving creativity problems with students was kind of one of my specialties. So I'm really excited to get into this with you. A ton of people that came to me were struggling with feeling stifled, feeling blocked, feeling creatively stuck. And I know a lot of people experience that, or just wanting to be creative and being scared about it, because the more serious we get about it, the more resistance we have to it. We're going to get into all of that. So I've had this conversation with a lot of people, and I've helped a lot of people with it and tried a lot of different things. So we're going to go into all that, and I think it's going to be really beneficial. I'm going to reference a few resources and books that have helped me and that you can check out if you want to go deeper on stuff. The benefits of being creative are enormous. And I don't just mean be creative. I mean, working on it intentionally, practicing being creative, having it be part of your arsenal of things you're working on, just like you might work on your scales or your technique or anything else. Okay. Especially if this feels like a weak point for you, it's going to be a huge reward. Einstein said, imagination is more important than knowledge. I think by the end of this, we're all going to be on the same page about that. If you struggle with creativity, or if you just want a boost of inspiration right now, or if you want some specific, really great ideas on how to exercise and improve your creativity or unblock your creative potential, or maybe you just want to hear some cool information about how creative thinking works, what holds us back, what the research says, and how to get through that. Well, any of those things or all of them, stay tuned for this whole episode because it's going to be a good one. I'm Jared Borkowski from soundguitarlessons.com, where I have courses that help guitarists express themselves more freely and confidently through improvisation, through theory mastery, through arranging, and much more. If you're new here, welcome. Please subscribe and follow. I have new lesson videos every week on YouTube, and I have podcast style episodes like this once a month. I've been wanting to do this episode for a long time. I wanted to do it justice because it's such an important topic to me, and here we are doing it justice, so I'm glad you're here. I'm going to read an email that came in that was a question about creativity. It's a question I get all the time, a really common question, and getting this one prompted me to just say, okay, let's do this. Let's go deep on creativity so we can help people unlock their creativity who are working on learning knowledge and applying it to creativity. I'm going to read that email. Then we're going to talk about knowledge versus creativity, and I'm going to have you give yourself a score with knowledge versus creativity so you can see, do I need to work more on one of these two things? I mean, some people are just extremely creative and not creating a skill set to then use their creativity with, but a lot of us are gaining knowledge without exercising the creativity. Then we're going to go into details of what holds us back, what the most common struggles are, and this is based on stuff I've read and research and also my own experience and students who've come to me. Then we'll just have a big handful of creativity exercises, tangible things you can try, but don't let the word exercise scare you off. They're just prompts. They're just ideas. They are suggestions that work. They're just things that work, and they're super fun, and it can make just a huge impact for you. You can kind of pick and choose something, and I have a bunch of those for you, so we're going to go into those. Like I said, I'll have a couple kind of book references along the way for things that I've learned from. This is going to be cool. Let's do it. Let's get into it. Okay, so Michael wrote to me and asked this question. And like I said, basically a version of this question comes up all the time. And I really appreciate the questions and lesson requests that I get. And I kind of consider any question kind of a lesson request, because if I don't have an answer to it on my channel already, I go and make a lesson for it, or I put it in my queue of lessons to make. So please request or suggest lessons anytime. You can just leave a comment below any video, and especially the new videos I make, I always will check those. So Michael says, "Hi Jared, I have a fairly good grasp of chord shapes and squeaking out 1, 3, 5, pentatonic shapes, triads, and inversions, etc. But what I just don't get is transforming theory into creativity. You said in video 2 of Making Any Chord," from one of my videos of a series that I was doing, quote, "understanding theory gives us creative freedom." And that is absolutely true. And I teach a lot of theory, and I believe in this very much, that theory knowledge gives us tools and skills that we can be creative with much faster. And this is absolutely critical, because you're going to hear about in this episode how coming up with ideas quickly and not judging them is one of the core things that we can do to enhance our creativity. But I digress already. So here Michael says, "Understanding theory gives us creative freedom, but how? If you could give me a pointer or two on how to move into musical playing of this stuff, I think I would run a mile for joy." So all this theory knowledge, how do you move into musical playing of it? So that's the specific question, but we can zoom out and say, this is a challenge of knowledge versus creativity. How do you take knowledge or skills and be creative with it? How do you apply it to make an art form, to express yourself with it? So theory knowledge to actual music. Let's talk about knowledge versus creativity. Knowledge versus creativity, instead of just seeking more knowledge, more stuff. Oh, I need to learn more. Oh, I need to learn more. And this fear of us thinking we need to know something more before we can do something is one of the biggest things holding us back. Where do you land on knowledge versus creativity? And maybe you're watching this because you're interested in just kind of getting a couple extra tidbits, but you feel creatively perfectly fit, so to speak, that creativity itself is not a problem for you. Great. Score yourself now. Knowledge versus creativity. Do you watch a ton of YouTube videos? Do you watch all my theory videos? And this is where Michael would probably score himself higher on the knowledge and lower on the creativity. And that's perfectly fine. This is quite common. So we're trying to solve this problem now. But you also might be high on the creativity and lower on the knowledge. I've identified with that in the past, where I have tons of ideas, but I can't execute them because I don't have the skill set yet to actually execute them. So I've struggled with that many times in different domains and areas of creativity in my life. But over time, I learned about how the creativity part can be actually practiced and worked on, just like you might say, I need to learn my scales, or I need to learn some other skill set to unlock this creativity. So if you're in that kind of more knowledge, which I think a lot of people are, because the knowledge is so accessible, the information is so accessible. I mean, I teach so much of this stuff on my channel. It's all over the place. You can find chord charts, you can find scale diagrams, you can find lesson exercises, courses, everything like that. But there's that mystery of now what, and even you can play it over a backing track, and even you can, play through a song, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're being creative. Being creative is kind of a state of mind. It's not really an output. This is increasingly a relevant conversation with AI happening right now and exploding, because it seems creative and it seems like it can just output, whatever we want creatively. But really it's just knowing how to craft something. So actual creativity is different than just a craft, which is like a skill. And that's great too. And craft is great. And a lot of times when I'm practicing, I'm just working on the craft of it so I can have that skill to then use creatively. So creative is a state of mind, and it is a feeling, and it feels expressive. We're going to get more into that. So the biggest important piece of advice here is that if you don't have creative ideas and you don't feel connected and inspired when you're playing in a creative way, or know how to piece it together creatively, then you'll know how to do this by the end of this video. But just start to think of creativity itself and creating and coming up with ideas as your thing to work on, as your homework. Okay, that is now a category to practice. It's on your routine, or however you do it. Then your main job, and let's just say you're sitting down in one session. So I do this kind of session by session. I'm sitting down for one practice session, and I'm not feeling it. I'm not engaged. I'm not inspired. I'm not getting ideas. Nothing feels right. Nothing sounds good. And let's say I'm wanting to improvise and compose a little bit, and that's kind of the thing I like the most, and it is. but nothing feels right. So instead of just saying, nothing feels right, okay, I guess I'll go practice this technique exercise. Okay, that's not the worst thing to do if you know for sure you need that other thing and you say, I'm not feeling it right now. Let me go use this time right now really valuably for something else. What we often do though is go practice something else that is not actually that high value. What we can do is not just hope and wait to be more creative another time, is have the thing we're working on right then. So say me in this scenario sitting there, not inspired. I change what I'm wanting to work on to say, I am going to now look for that inspiration. I'm going to now challenge myself to find it, find the feeling, and find the ideas and work to generate them. Again, it might sound like, how do you do that? And the suggestions I have later in the video, it's going to be crystal clear how to do that. For me personally, I never fail to find it. But often I do feel like it's not there at first. And then I just say, okay, my homework right now is nothing else. I'm not going to sit here and work on something, the song that I thought I was going to work on. I'm going to work on channeling into my creativity. I'm going to work on getting into that zone or that flow, or whatever you want to call it. Okay, so just have that now be understood, that it's a thing to practice, and not just overall, but case by case by case. You can work on it when you feel like you need it, okay? And we'll get into exactly how to do that. Let's talk about exactly what holds us back. Let's talk about a little bit of the science that has been studied on this, the types of thinking. There's a lot of research going on about creativity right now and a lot of talk about it, which is very exciting. So let's get into that for a second. So what holds us back, creatively speaking? There's so much we could talk about with this. I'm just going to focus in on one particular thing, which is two competing types of thinking that we are engaging in at any given time. And we kind of are trained to not be creative in a way. So the two types of thinking are divergent thinking, which means the imagination, the daydreaming, the half sleeping state, or the brainstorming. Divergent thinking is looking laterally or looking at one problem from a bunch of different angles, thinking of a bunch of solutions for the same thing, thinking of as many things as you can to use, this pick for. Saying to use it for guitar is a not very creative idea, right? Saying to use it as a UFO in a little movie is a creative idea, right? And a million other things that it could be. So divergent thinking is alternative options, as many of them as possible, and able to kind of come up with those. Alternatively, the competing type of thinking is called convergent thinking. This one is something we're all familiar with, which is the judgment, the testing, the evaluating, the censoring of things. We are taught to prioritize convergent thinking. Logic, analysis, test. What's the results? Like, is this good? Is this bad? And so what we have as a habit, as adults specifically, is that our divergent thinking, which is available to all of us, our imagination. I mean, think about dreams that you might have. It's like, where the heck did that come from? Divergent thinking, daydreaming, it's available to all of us at the snap of a finger if we exercise this ability to get there. But our convergent thinking is always happening at the same time. It doesn't need to be, but we're kind of conditioned or trained or evolved as adults to be more that way. Such a classic problem is having ideas, wanting to be creative, having the impulse, really not really having a problem with creativity necessarily. It's just that the judgment comes right away and says, that's not a good idea. That's a bad idea. And so as we go evaluating, oh, I thought of something. Now, is it good? Okay, maybe not. Okay, that feels bad. Here's another idea. Is that one good? Oh, I don't know if that one's good. So the censor, as Julia Cameron from the book The Artist's Way calls it. Artist's Way is a kind of a workbook from the 80s that was very popular, that people would work through and kind of unblock their creativity. I don't know if it resonates so much with people now, but it's powerful if you're open to it. I worked through that book a couple times and I found it very helpful. So divergent thinking, convergent thinking, imagination, ideas, and then judgment of those ideas. So if we're thinking those two ways at the same time, we're just blocking every idea. We're just cutting it off. We're just nipping it in the bud. I don't remember where I heard this one from, but there was a study where they studied a population of people through different ages, starting when they were 5 years old. So 5-year-olds, and they were studying their divergent thinking, their creativity, their kind of unleashed creativity. We all know the imagination of a kid, right? And 98% of the 5-year-olds were considered thinking creatively on a genius level of creativity. They followed those kids as they were older, and then the percentage went down, all the way to adulthood, where it was considered 2% of adults. 2% of adults had that same kind of hyper level of creative thinking. It's not because, supposedly, that we lost the ability to do it. It's that we are cutting it off at the pass. We are now inhibited. So a lot of our homework for creativity is going to be working on cutting off now, instead of our creativity, cutting off our inhibitions, right? Trying to not judge. And there's a few very practical, tangible ways to do that it seems like it would be hard to do that, but there's a few tactics that are really great. So your imagination is always there. We're just judging it. We're just judging it like crazy. But isn't that awesome to think? Like, oh, these 5-year-olds are on this like creative genius level of thinking. Just anything goes, right? Any crazy idea goes. And now not so much anymore, right? Not so much anymore. And now just think about this for your guitar playing, or your insert the blank of whatever your thing is, your interest, your hobby, your art form. And how often do we try to do something and then think, maybe not explicitly with words, but we have this feeling at least of, is this right? Is this the right way to do it? And what am I supposed to do next? Right? What does this chord connect to? What's supposed to be the right thing for this? The right scale for this? And even though there are scales that work over chords, it's never right. You literally can do anything you want. I'm gonna encourage you more about that in a minute. Okay. So there's a few problems going on. One could just be that we don't know how to access that creativity at all. But another one that I've seen many, many times is creative people who really identify as creative people. And the more we identify as it, the more problematic it becomes. Because what does that mean? We are taking it too seriously at that point. You can phrase this however you want, but if you're really identifying as something, taking it too seriously, suddenly becoming ambitious about it, all these things are fine. There's nothing wrong with those. It's just that they can lead to caring more about the outcome. And caring about the outcome is the thing that's going to kill creativity the fastest, which, I mean, this is going to be the lifelong struggle, right? There's no way to stop caring about the outcome, but there are ways to try to just continue to pursue our ideas until we find the thing that feels true to us. But the more we do care about the outcome and the less practiced we are at how to deal with that, the more it's just going to crush us, creatively speaking, right? And if it crushes us creatively speaking, as musicians, as creative people, I mean, that's soul crushing. That's like depression. That is not a happy life. And in general, a lot of research has shown that enhancing our creativity in general, exercising it in these ways that we're talking about, having creativity in our life intentionally enhances people's well-being a huge amount. So I had a student. His name is Alex, and actually, there's a video on the channel of me teaching him a lesson live. We'll link to that in the description of the YouTube video. So Alex was a student of mine for a while, and I taught him when he was pretty young and then kind of into his teens, and he was extremely creative. He was coming up with song ideas all the time, new things, like just prolific idea creation, prolific, and from my perspective, seeing him once a week, seeing him come with ideas, they all were phenomenal. I mean, I'm always so impressed with people who are just generating these ideas and have very little of the skill knowledge base to reference when they're doing that. And so much of it is just amazing or profound, or using principles that one might learn the theory of, but because that's what sounds good to them. And you don't need to know the theory to make that up if you just explore, and have fun. So Alex was doing this, and then he's getting a little older, taking it more seriously, playing music in like school bands and stuff like that. Then he started his own band with his friends. And then there was this kind of turning point, and he came to me and he had this band, and they were like trying to rehearse a couple times a week and come up with songs. And he came to me just so disappointed, saying, I lost it. Why can't I write a song anymore? And he had written like hundreds of things before, and he was so into it. He wanted to do this really seriously, have a band. And now he has this band, and he just felt like it was all gone. He's like, I can't come up with anything anymore. Nothing is happening. Nothing is coming to me. And I saw it crystal clear in the moment, because I've seen this a bunch. I've experienced it myself. And it was just that he was too serious about it. He was caring about the outcome. He was like, oh, this is a real thing now. Oh, we want to record and have everyone hear it, and this is serious, and it has to be good. Now it has to be good. And that is the number one thing that's going to ruin a project, that it has to be good. Sometimes things do have to be good though, because if you're hired to do it professionally and it's a creative job, and that's why wisdom, years of experience, practicing this stuff comes in. We have to navigate that. But that's just that story I've seen, happen many times, but it's very clear in my memory, helping this particular student, Alex, through that. Let's talk about a couple other common struggles. So here is another really common issue that people face. This is a concept, an idea that is out there. People kind of believe that we should, when trying to create something, let's just say writing a song, for example, that we should know what it's supposed to be in our mind, that there's kind of a finished idea, a finished song in our head, and then we execute to bring it alive. That is a misconception. It's not like it can't happen. It can happen, but it's not the way that people create stuff. It's just not. Talk to any artist or any creative, and they'll talk about living in the process is the joy of it, the absolute fun of it, discovering what's going to happen and figuring out what the piece of work or art or music or whatever you're working on, what it tells you about yourself in the end, I think is the point. I think that's the reason. Because again, if it's just about having something that sounds good or looks good like everything else, where's the value in that? And again, especially now that AI can just do that, where's the human value in that? So the discovery process, and it's not like the end result can't look or sound like something else, but how honest is that? How personal is that to us? How much does it give us goosebumps and make us feel something, right? Forever, this is going to be the value of art, and increasingly so. It's going to be about what we get out of doing it. Period. And if the end result is something that we can see as kind of a mirror into ourself in a deeper way than we could have, because there's so much subconscious happening. And we're going to talk more about how to exercise that, to follow intuition is so critical. It's not about thinking what's right, what's the next thing here. It's about feeling and guessing and trying and testing. So I've worked with some people who want to be creative, and they have that impulse and they have ideas, but because it's not this polished thing in their head yet, they don't even start putting it down. They don't even start getting it out. And that's a very stuck, very frustrating feeling also. And why do we think that way? Well, probably just because when we see work of other people, when we see art in the world, when we hear music in the world, it's a done thing. It's usually a very presentable, very polished, very amazing thing. So we kind of assume that's how it started. But usually to get there is a very messy process. So think about it like abstract painting. Super fun. Drawing, something like that, something visual, whatever. You're not going to draw something. You're not going to paint a thing. You can, of course. You can do whatever you want. But in this thought experiment here, you just put a blob down. You just splash some paint. You just do a brush stroke. You just whatever. And now there's something there. And now you can just think about it. You can look at it. You can, what is that? What do I do now? Okay, where is that going to take you? Then you do another one. And whatever the previous thing you did is going to inform where you might want to go next. That's pretty much always the creative process anyway, even if we think there's something in our head. And the funny part is, when we do have an idea in our head, and I've heard a lot of other people talk about this too, when we do have a clear idea of what we think something's supposed to be, it's impossible to actually access that exact version of it. For some people, that drives them crazy, because if they can see it or hear it in their mind and they can't truly get it that way, that would be very frustrating. I don't tend to have that problem because I'm much more of this one step at a time. That's my favorite thing. Just try anything. It doesn't matter. Any note. There's no note that's going to sound bad. Any chord, anything at all. And then after that, you have something. What could you do after that? What could you do after that? What's the next layer? What's the next thing? So that kind of abstract painting where you don't even have a plan. It's more about the action. It's 100% about the process, and then discovering, look at what the heck came out. That is crazy. For music, for me, I love songwriting. It's the first thing I fell in love with in music. I only got into any sort of academic knowledge or practice or classical or jazz or improvisation or this stuff I teach on the channel much later in my life. I really just wanted to make stuff up. And I always had this problem with assuming that a song is always about something. And maybe it is about something, and maybe it is always in some ways about something, but I just believe strongly that a song doesn't have to be about something. It feels so contrived to me to say, I'm going to write a song about, this person or this experience or this. And you can, of course. And I think many songwriters do that amazingly well. I don't. Whenever I try to write, have an idea, I'm going to write about this thing, it just sounds way too on the nose. I like abstraction. I like just aesthetic. And so I tend to go that direction with it, where it's just like, how does this make me feel? And the interesting thing is that I could write the randomest, aesthetically pleasing lyrics and a song, not know at all what it's about, but hear it a few months later and realize that it was very much about something, that it was something important to me, that it was hinting at, getting at something that was deeper inside me. So that's that part where I, think of that abstract painting, and then you step away from it or have time away from it, and you go back and see, wow, I was really going through a hard time when I painted that. Look at that burst of emotion that's happening there. But at the time, you're just thinking, random idea, how does that make me feel? That's why it's so critical to not judge it as you go, which I know is easier said than done, and you're going to learn how to work on that in a second. If we judge it as we go, then we think, this doesn't sound like that other person that I'm supposed to, this doesn't sound like somebody else who is renowned. And if it's not good like them, then it's not good. I just watched a documentary on Steven Spielberg just 2 nights ago. I love watching documentaries about any creative person, period. So there were commentators on his style, his approach, people who worked with him for years, and talked about how he was directing and creating films much more like an abstract painter. And just like we talked about, where he didn't even know what he was going to do next. And he just kind of grabbed the camera, shot something, and didn't know where it was going. And then thought, oh, okay, that gives me an idea for what's next and this next thing. And just imagine these polished Hollywood films that we would assume are so plotted out, and that one of the most successful filmmakers and directors of our time was doing this approach that we're talking about. Throw an idea out and just see where it takes you. And to do that with film seems crazy, but that's what he was known to do that at times, where he didn't actually have a plan. It might be a cool idea for me to just grab the guitar right now and play a couple things just out of nothing and see where it takes us. And let's do that. So in a way, I'm hesitant to do this, of course, because there's absolutely no plan. And I don't want to have it be something that has to be good, because that would defeat the entire point. And I'm going to do a couple other guitar exercises later for the guitarists specifically, because it's very important that we just let ourselves be able to play any random note. And that might kind of not seem creative, and that can be really, atonal or something like that. But the point is just like, there's not a wrong note. And at some point you have to try to feel something from it. Okay, so let's just consider that an idea. And I've worked a lot on improvisation, so I can get ideas out faster. I mean, that's the point for me. I want to get ideas out faster. I want to not take forever trying things. And I keep hinting at all these exercises I'm going to give you to enhance your creativity. One of the core thing is going to be just how many ideas, how much divergent thinking can you indulge in before you start judging it. Okay? So so I'm just kind of like, okay, well, let's just roll with that. Okay, I'm not saying this is good. I'm not saying you should like what I'm doing, but I'm doing something, right? I'm not letting something stop me from just playing, right? So the same thing goes with lyrics. Lyrics, I'm not trained at all in lyrics. I like them. I like exploring words and stuff. It's even more important for me to not worry about them being good. I'm not even going to try to talk about something. I'm just going to put words out there. And over time, they might shape into something that feels really, really, really meaningful to me. But at first, any word at all, okay? Going home, going home, going home, and I'm going where? And then so I'm just saying, oh, going sounds good. Going where? Going, and I'm just in the moment doing this. But I do a lot to be honest, because I go into this intuitively right now. It's I literally would just mumble stuff, and I heard that Paul Simon did the same thing, just what you do, gonna go, So notice, and I'm really not thinking about it as I do this. Words are coming out on that first phrase, and the rest is blah 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 blah. It's like I'm just like testing stuff out, and if I just did that for like an hour, it would mold itself into one or two things or three that I'm like, oh, that's probably going to stay in the final version. We're just weeding it out. So you're hearing a lot of stuff that probably isn't, right? Gonna go anywhere but here. Now gonna go somewhere else. So now I'm like, oh, gonna go anywhere but here. What does that mean? So I kind of chase. I'm like, that has a meaning to it. Do I want to say that? Is that what I mean? I don't know. Is that what my subconscious means? What am I running away from? And this is now me analyzing it when I shouldn't, right? I think of that much later, but it's like, that could be powerful. Like maybe this song is about something. Maybe it is, right? But very different than me saying, I'm gonna write a song about being afraid of my current emotional state and wanting to escape that. But instead, I'm just like, I'm just throwing paint down and seeing what it teaches me about myself. Is pretty vulnerable to demonstrate, but on my own, I have this as a pretty strong muscle. The people who are closest to me, like my wife, if she's around, I don't care at all. I don't. If she hears me, she's not listening anyway. It doesn't matter. So and as far as the feelings go, I'm like, it's a little too rocky right now. I don't know. I'm gonna maybe change the vibe of it. Right? And wherever you are in your skill set and your journey and your knowledge, don't worry about, but I don't even know if those two chords work together. That's not the point at all. It doesn't matter. The chords don't have to work together. You can play anything at all. And so if I just played, I'm not thinking what that chord is. If I wanted to analyze what it is, I could, because I have that knowledge of theory. It sounds like a movie soundtrack now. Okay, I actually felt something very emotional from that. And what I was doing was I put my fingers down on 3 notes and I kind of plucked each one. And then I just moved one of the notes randomly down another fret. That's it. I wasn't thinking about chords. I wasn't thinking about keys. I wasn't thinking about anything, but just this. Oh, I'm just going to move this down. And then I'm just going to move this one down. And I'm going to move that one down again. Okay, now here's where skill can come into play, because I know this chord and I know exactly what it might sound like if I do something very specific next, like. So that brings us all the way back around to how the theory knowledge can enhance creativity, because it can just give me things to try like that. To the extent that it can inhibit creativity, or any knowledge can inhibit creativity, it's when we think there are correct ways to do things. It's not about correct at all. It's about this gets this result. In the end, do I want that result, right? This chord to this chord gets a certain sound that I knew how to expect, but that doesn't mean it's better or worse or the right thing or anything. So when we only do the stuff we've learned, music works this way, theory works this way. When we only do the stuff we've learned, then we're really not using that creative impulse, right? So I have a lot of suggestions coming up. I keep hinting at them, but it's going to be so fun, because one of the ways to get out of that is to say, oh, I'm just kind of stuck in this box. Well, you might want to just do the most unexpected thing possible or something. I'll talk details about this in a second. I hope that was helpful. Again, kind of a vulnerable thing for me, but I do it constantly on my own, constantly, every single day. Not just jamming. I'm not just like improvising and jamming. I am feeling it out and building on stuff in this process and kind of in this way that I just talked about. So one more little section here before I just go into giving you things you can actually take home and try. And that's just really driving the point home that creativity is obviously, just personal, completely unique and individual to you. I mean, that's the value of it, right? It's the entire point. We can think that there's a right way to do it. There's no right way. There's nothing that you can do wrong. So especially on your own, just not being afraid to try anything is absolutely critical. But it's not just about that, but I think just believing this really deeply, that truly there's no wrong way. And there may be people that actually don't believe that. I would just firmly disagree with them, but there's truly no wrong way you could do it. The only way there's a wrong way to do something is if you put an if at the end of that. There's a wrong way to do it if you're trying to do an accurate representation of a certain style in a certain era or something like that, right? Then you have to put like a prescription on it, like, oh, you want to do vocal runs like Mariah Carey, like, well, then there's going to be specific things to work on because you have a goal, you have a specific goal. But I am not talking about that. I'm talking about emotional, personal expression and creativity and experimentation, divergent thinking, right? Divergent thinking, not just craft, not just making something, but being creative. Very different, very different. So the critical thing here is it's our feelings, our emotional reactions to what we're making and discovering. And this is why it's unique, because no one's feeling exactly what you're feeling when you play something. Like, you are just exploring and listening with your body, with your, however you want to think of it, with your emotions, and just trying things. And you might try 100 things and feel nothing. And then something will hit you. And very critical to know is that doesn't mean it's good. And that's a completely subjective term anyway. So there's not really such a thing as good. But that doesn't mean that you got it in the bag. That doesn't mean that it's good tomorrow. And the stuff that you didn't like, it also doesn't mean that that's not going to make you feel something the next day. I hope that makes sense what I'm saying. It's driving home the point even more firmly that we cannot judge it as we go. We simply can't. So we just have to get stuff out. And I try to really, truly not judge it as I go, even though I'm following, that felt good, so I'm going to go this direction. If I end up liking it enough in the moment to record it, maybe when I listen to that in 2 weeks, I'm going to hate it. And maybe this thing that I think so often this has happened to me, where I really worked on something and then thought, this is so dumb. What am I doing? Gosh, this is dumb. And then I would listen to it 2 weeks later and feel very connected to it. Very, like it was a very important thing to make. That is the dream. That is the creativity we're looking for, that kind of thing. So you're searching for a feeling. And if you don't get that feeling, then you are just on the hunt for it and just waiting for it and just looking, try this, right? And if you're just crafting, there's nothing wrong with craft and skill. But if you're just making something and you're not searching for those true individual intuition guiding feelings, you know, that's what I would call being creative with a capital C. right? Otherwise, you were just making something, which can also be fine. But it's nice to know what we're doing and why. Let's go on to things you can try. There's some powerful stuff here. Okay, these are tangible take-home homework, creativity tips. One of these, at least, if not more, will do the trick for somebody out there, for any one of us. So the first one, this is in no particular order. The first one is just stay in your divergent thinking, stay in your brainstorm state for as long as possible. I mean, that's what brainstorming is. Idea. What is it? Next, more. Don't think about it. Just get it down. And the secret to this is acting quickly, quickly. It's amazing how fast our brains are at things. It's judging it that slows us down. Just next thing, make something. So you have to apply that appropriately to your situation. Are you improvising? Don't think about if you're doing the right thing, playing the right scale, or liking it or whatever. Find a way to stay in the flow of in the moment and listen to it later. The most powerful thing you can do if you're working on improvisation is listen to your own playing later, not while you're doing it, later. And then you'll know, wow, that sounded way better than I thought at that spot. And this other thing, I don't think I want to do that anyway. There's no way to know that in a moment. And that's definitely my experience with improvisation, that if I'm thinking about it in the moment, I just hate it always. It all feels like silly to me for some reason. If I'm like overthinking it and not just letting it happen and feeling it. As far as the songwriting thing goes, and lyrics or writing it, then just staying in that longer. So that's a little bit of a vague one, but let me share with you a really, really concrete thing. This is the next item. It's what I call the secret weapon. And I used this on dozens of students when I was teaching, specifically the students that were creative and wanting to compose, write, record songs, create music, make music, and not just play. Since I kind of specialized in this, I would kind of attract people who came to me wanting to kind of unlock their creativity and work on songs. Okay, so I had this process that I called the secret weapon, and it worked 100% of the time. Keep in mind, this is a person who already knows how to make stuff. They're not needing the basic skills for it. The basic skills are great, and I'll work with someone on that as much as they need, all fundamentals of music or just technique to play or whatever. This is someone who knows how to make something, but it's more like a mental block that's happening. Pretty much like the student Alex that I told you about, taking it too seriously or who knows whatever reason. Usually people with a creative impulse, like they know they want to be creative and have that identity, this is what happens to them. So the secret weapon project is to create a finished piece of music. Let's just pretend it's a songwriter. You have to finish something on a certain cadence, on a certain regular basis. Okay, this is either weekly or daily, depending on, totally by choice, right? Depending on how busy your life is or whatever. So let's say weekly. Okay, so every single week you have to finish a piece of music, okay? I don't want to say finish a song, even if we're thinking of it as a songwriter, because that makes it sound like it needs to have a certain structure, and it doesn't at all. It just has to be something that can count as being a finished idea. It could be a part of something bigger later, but it has to kind of feel like I can listen to this from the beginning to the end, and it doesn't feel like, why'd you stop? That's all, right? It just is a finished idea. It can be a segment of something, but it does have to feel like it kind of ended. It had a beginning, it had a middle, it had an end. So you have to write and create and record, and recording can be just on the phone as an idea or whatever anyway, but you got to get it out. You got to get it down. You got to record it. And you need to do that once a week for a certain amount of time. Like a great amount of time is months, honestly. So 6 months would be great. That might seem really long. Let's say 3 months. Let's say that this is the amount of time that this experiment is going to go on, once a week for 3 months. But there's very important rules to it. One, you're not allowed to share what you made with anyone else. You simply are. The rules of this are you're not allowed to. If it was for this project, you cannot share it with anyone else. Rule 2, you are not allowed to listen to it after you're done with it. Okay, so you can listen to it while you're working on it because you're trying to do it. But as soon as you're like, cool, I did that for this week, you're not allowed to listen to it at all, because that's going to create attachment to it. So getting attached to it, getting attached to the identity, getting attached to the result, getting attached to the outcome, this is where the suffering, the challenge, the block is happening. And I always talk about parameters with practicing anything, right? You need a set of guidelines to exercise something. There's other rules that can be applied to this as well, but those two alone do the trick. You do a certain amount at a certain cadence, and it has to be done. You have to do it, and it has to be done on time, or you're just putting off you're just not doing it because it's scary, right? So you have to actually do it. But it's so critical you don't let anyone hear it, and even more critical that you don't listen to it yourself. And it doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to be used for anything. No one ever has to hear it ever. You can listen to them only after the project is done that you decided the amount of time ahead of time. So let's say it's going to be a 3-month time. Cool. You can listen to them all after that, only after that. Okay. And then after that, if we're done, you can share it with other people, whatever. So that's why like 6 months is even more powerful. What this is forcing us to do is forcing us to be in the process of it. It's all about the process. That's the entire point. It's the experience. It's what you can learn from it. It's what you can find from it. It's what you can feel from it. And if we're thinking about the result and if it's good and if other people like it, then we're screwed. We're completely screwed. And I said this applies to someone who's, maybe already identifies as creative, but this would work for absolutely anyone. You're exercising the muscles that are important here, which are the inhibition issues, getting confident, flowing freely, just staying divergent, that kind of thing. I think it's the funnest thing you could ever do. I think it's so freaking fun. It's like having a journal that's private to you. No one else reads it. You don't even go back and read it yourself, but you're just processing stuff. It's free writing. It's whatever comes to your mind, but it's with your music, your song, your whatever. Like I said, this works 100% of the time in my experience, the way I've seen it, that just people unleash and all this amazing stuff comes out, and I don't hear it until after the project is over, and it's incredible. And almost inevitably, almost all of that stuff is stuff that we feel emotionally connected to in this creative way that is the point of creativity, because we're allowed. It's so freeing. It's such a relief that you are allowed to just try anything. There's no risk. There's no risk. So then the most personal, beautiful stuff comes out. The most amazing stuff comes out, and you know that no one ever has to hear it. Whereas if you're like, I'm in this band and we got to make this song and we got to play this show and we got to do this, and does it sound good enough? No. Oh, terrifying, right? So yes, we want to get to that point of maybe doing music seriously and sharing it. But if our core skill set, our muscle of just this process of getting into the flow and doing it is not sufficiently grounded, then we're really going to fall apart when we try to do it, for real. So that secret weapon experiment can be amazing to just give you the fortitude to then go do it in a different way. And for real, when there's high pressure, you need to be able to do it when the pressure is a little higher, or maybe it's just so fun you always do it that way, but it works all the time. Moving on with more things you can try. There's a book called Writing Better Lyrics by Pat Patterson, I believe is the author. And early in the book, there's an exercise where he says, you want to practice writing lyrics and limit your time. This applies to anything, not just lyrics. I'm just sharing where I heard the initial idea from. That actually set a timer for 10 minutes and practice trying to get some lyrics out, and that it's critical that you don't let yourself go beyond that, because you want to feel the pressure of getting into a heightened state, the ideal, creative state, faster, rather than feeling like I have all the time in the world to try all the stupid things. And so this is just one angle. I don't necessarily subscribe to it as the only answer. It's just a tool. It's an exercise. So limit your time, and then your goal is to have something by the end of that time, and that's it. And then you want to do that maybe a number of days in a row or whatever, and you realize, oh, it's taking me much less time to get into the zone or find the creativity or get into that feeling by setting a timer. So that's another thing you can try. Tried and true method for just overall feeling looser creatively is just free writing. This is one of my favorite things to do. I guess it's like journaling, but specifically free writing, where you don't stop. You don't let yourself stop, and you're not trying to document the day, and you're not trying to, dear diary, and you're not going to read it later or anything like that, or you can read it later, but it is just truly free writing. What happens to come out when you just type or just write. You're just going to complain about someone you're frustrated with, or you're going to talk about some issue or how you didn't get enough sleep, or all that stuff is going to come out. But it's the brain just generating real experiences and real material and communicating about them. And so this is known to help writers a lot. And this is like one of the core things that Julia Cameron in The Artist's Way has you do starting like day one. You have to start writing every morning. She calls it morning pages, and you have to do 3 pages and but just, you can do it, fit it in for your life however you want. The idea of free writing. So I do this consistently, especially if I'm feeling a little stuck, just write. And by doing that, for me, it very quickly reminds me that I can do the same thing with music. I'm like, if this works so well, like, wow, I can just write the garbage on the page that is whatever comes out of my brain, whatever I'm thinking, and I'm just repeating certain things, and I'm fixated on this problem in my life or whatever it is. It's just like, wow, I can just go. If I can do that with writing and loosen myself up that way, then I can do it with music. This is how the beginnings of that secret weapon thing happened, because when I was doing a lot of free writing, I realized, well, I'm not a writer, I'm a musician. So what if I do this free writing with music? And every single day I just made a free writing piece of music, recorded it, and it was a profound experience for me. Almost everything I made during that period, I felt very connected to and ended up using in various projects and stuff like that. So, but the key was to be considering it just open-ended. This is not for anything. This is purely for kind of therapeutic processing. That's it. Here's another one. This is related to the brainstorming. You want to make as many options of something as possible before moving on, or not before moving on, but before thinking about it, judging it, that kind of thing. So let's pretend that you want to write an album. So this is very conceptual and hard to do, but you want to not think about what are the 12 songs that are going to be on that album. You want to just say, I'm going to have a period of time where I just write as quickly as possible. I think a lot of writers do this, where they just write, and then they go back and edit it later, right? I've heard writers talk about that and just let kind of stuff come up and be grammatically wrong if it is or whatever. So you just want to write the next one, write the next one, write the next one, write the next one, and don't get into any stuck place about is this what I want? Is this good? What are people going to think of? And so by continuing on, it's very similar to the brainstorm thing, but it's actually creating a huge amount of options and body of work for a specific goal that you do care about this time. Within a song, you can do the same thing. If you're like, I want to make a bridge for this song. Great. I'm going to set a timer, or I'm going to make myself, decide parameters. I'm going to make myself create a bridge in 15 minutes every day for 10 days, then I have these 10 options. That might be overkill, whatever. But I hope just in general, like some of these things are sinking in. This next one is one of my favorites ever. This does wonders. This is incredible. This is the idea of making something bad on purpose. You could think of it in all kinds of ways. Here's the 3 ways I think of it. Ruin it, right? Are you making something and is it becoming too precious and now you're getting stuck because you like it too much? That is going to happen. So ruin it. Okay, ruin it. Throw a wrench in it. So ruin it, or the idea of doing the opposite. What's the good thing? What's the thing I'm supposed to do? Do the opposite of that, or just make it bad, make it suck. Any of those ways, you can think of that as all kind of the same thing. Do the opposite of what you think is good. I like to draw and paint, and my friend and I were doing an art project a long time ago, and we were making all these little cards that we were going to give out to people, and we were painting them ourselves. And we did a bunch of them, and then they were just like too nice. They all just seemed too normal seeming. And so we went back through every single one with a Sharpie and drew these black squares in random places over the top of what we painted. And then they all suddenly seemed awesome, because we were like, let's just ruin it. Did these nice, colorful paintings, and they just seem too nice, too plain, too normal. And so it's just this idea of like, it needs just something drastic. It needs something crazy. There's a scene in there's a biopic about Andy Warhol, or no, it's the Basquiat movie, where Andy Warhol and Basquiat are painting together, and Andy Warhol's like, "Oh, what do you think?" And then Basquiat goes, "I think it needs this," and he just what you would think of as ruining the painting, just puts a big line through it with a paintbrush after Andy Warhol was like working on this. And then Andy Warhol is like, you're right, that's what it needed.
Well, geez, Jean, that was my favorite part. What are you doing? You're painting out everything I do. Wow. Oh, that's great. System with just the M. Okay, I see what you mean about that white. You're a real painter.
Side note of this is be willing to sound bad. This is actually just critical advice, period. If we think it has to sound good, we're screwed. Okay? We need to be okay with it sounding bad, with it not being good. It's the only way we're going to find something good. You have to be willing to sound bad. And that goes for any goal you have in music, right? If you want to go jam with people, you have to be okay with sounding bad before you sound good. And you can't just only get good at home and then go sound great out there. You got to try the actual thing. So you have to be willing to. And this fun exercise is to do something bad on purpose. Similar to that, very similar. Next item here is to do something specifically cheesy or stupid or silly. And I have a video on, making something that's bad or making something silly. I'll link to that in the description from a long time ago. But a story here is that David Bowie, supposedly from his hit song Changes, the story is that his goal was to write the cheesiest song he could write. That he was like, I'm going to make the cheesiest song, the stupidest song ever. It's just a joke. Turns out to be one of his biggest hits. So thinking of it as, not too seriously, and in this case, as a joke, I'm going to make something silly. And that's why early on, we do have so much success with creativity and why the 5-year-olds are the genius creatives. Because it's just whatever. It's just silly. It doesn't matter. It's not for anything. It's just completely a joke and a goof off and a fun. So if there's ways that we can hack ourselves into doing this, it's amazing. Okay, here's another one. This is interesting because I was talking about if you're just making something and you're just working on a craft and you're not necessarily being creative with a capital C. But one exercise that's really powerful is simply commit to making something and not worry about the feelings, not worry about all the intuition that I'm talking about. Just worry about the craft itself, but not the craft in the sense that I need to make something a certain style. I think that's where it goes the wrong path a little bit. Like you're not trying to mimic something unless you're studying that craft. Great, that's fine. But I'm talking in creativity practice here. Just commit to the fact that you're going to make something and finish it, and feel free to think of it as a craft. I think that unlocks it too, because a lot of our fear is just worried that we can't do it. We don't have what it takes. And so just say, I'm just going to build it. I'm just going to make something. There's an interesting book called The Death of the Artist. I forgot the author's name, but the book itself, if you wanted to look it up, you would find. He talks about the different eras of, there's kind of different phases of artists in our culture that early on, say in like Bach, I have a little Bach right here. Bach was not considered an artist during this time. This is like 1600s Baroque period. Bach was just considered a craft person, just like someone who might be a blacksmith or something like that. And yet he's this musical genius that is renowned in our time. But he was just doing a job. He just had to make a new piece of music for the church every week or more. He just was certainly a genius at his craft, but it wasn't about being an artist with a capital A. Right. And the next phase in our culture in terms of how we think of artists was the artist with a capital A, where now it's this turmoil. This is where the suffering, starving artist, the Van Gogh cutting off his ear, these tortured artists making these genius works. That's where this idea came from, this very kind of romantic era. And then the next phase of artists after that in our culture is the professional artists. And now there's institutions and there's colleges and like artists are professors, and there's kind of an industry to back it up, or there's grants and stuff like that. But I like this idea of the phases of the artist, and how in Bach's time, it was just about making something. It wasn't about this grand notion. And also it was very religious music, where he didn't consider himself to be the genius creator. He was just doing God's work, So this exercise is just create something, right? If you had an assignment to do it and you just had to make something, that would open it up, right? Tried and true creative hack is just to limit your options. Like whatever that means to you, limit your options. And that's why parameters are so important. People talk about that all the time, though. It's like impossible to create when you could do anything. But as soon as someone says, hey, I need this, this, and this, then you're like, oh, I could do that. That's going to be so fun. It's going to be incredibly fun because now I know, if I'm writing for specifically a certain amount of instruments, it's so much easier than just being like, oh, I can do anything. 2 more quick things. One of them is be random. I played the random notes on the guitar and talked about how that unlocks things a little bit. Another David Bowie story is that supposedly he had a deck of cards that just had chords, all kinds of chords on it. And he would, while working on a song, just pull one out. So it's going to be a random chord. The theory doesn't matter. It's not, if it's part of the key, it doesn't matter. And he was like, okay, that's the chord we're going to use next. And then get some very interesting chord changes because just pulling out something totally random. So being random can help a lot. Also remind us we don't have to be afraid of anything. The last thing I'll say here is that a lot of times, our main issue here with guitarists and say like Michael's question, how do I change theory into creativity? What I've noticed, this is very kind of practical one, less big picture, is that the theory a lot of times is practiced on the guitar without any feel to it, without rhythm to it. And that just adding rhythm to it can make it feel like, oh, now it's music, now it's creativity, now I'm making real music out of it. Let's do a guitar example. So if someone is practicing the pentatonic scale and they're going up the top string maybe, I say, okay, and this is flat 7 and this is 1 and this is flat 3 and okay, and here it is, and I'm going to practice it up and down. And we feel like, well, why can't I turn it into music? Why can't I be creative? Well, maybe, and not saying it's instant that you can do this, but a lot of times just rhythm is lacking. Same notes, I just had rhythm to it and had some structure to it. So little side note, just for the certain person, maybe that is you, where you're like, I can't turn these scales into music. I can't turn all this stuff I'm practicing and learning about into music. Get serious about trying different rhythms on it, whatever that is in the context. Your strumming patterns, make sure it's in time, try some phrasing stuff, and find a way to get into that. And suddenly might feel like music, and then you might feel something emotional from it, and then you're off to the races and doing all the right stuff that we're talking about here. There's a lot of good stuff out there if you're interested in going deeper on this. Rick Rubin, the music producer, incredible creative mind and just amazing person and obviously a huge success and influence in music, very recently published a book called The Creative Act. It's kind of like what I'm doing in this video, just it's not a narrative or it's just a bunch of kind of tips all in a row, but from someone who's really, really been there. So that's a very cool book. Some highlights from that I can share with you are just the emphasis of following your intuition, which we've been talking about, but that, just keep in mind, that is a muscle. That is something to practice. That is something that we can get better at. So what does that mean to follow your intuition? Great. Figure it out by trying it, and then it will get stronger and it will get faster. Don't think of things as always logical, something that he talks about. The intuition is the thing that is kind of deeper or subconscious. It can bring unexpected solutions, different directions of thinking, and just trusting that gut feeling. He also talks about being open to all ideas, period. And that's similar to what we're talking about, but it's nice to put it that way. Be open to all ideas, which means that we can't judge it while it's happening. One way to do this practically is you might try something and say, I hate that, but maybe it's good and I don't know. Maybe I'll love it later, right? So if you do find yourself judging, just know that the judgment of good or bad is completely subjective and fickle and changing constantly and different for everyone and different for us, depending on time of day and, anytime we're thinking about it or exposed to it. So staying open to all possibilities, avoiding premature judgment in particular, and just that great ideas can come from anywhere. And then lastly, another huge highlight I just want to feature is stuff that I talk about all the time with practicing and just our music practice, which is focus on the process, not the outcome. And we talked about that in this video. So just stuff that's reinforcing what we're already talking about, the process itself, not the outcome. Detaching ourselves from the outcome. Yeah, that's crazy, impossible sounding to do. But if we do the process more and realize how insanely rewarding it is, we'll just want to do the process for the process, period. So we have to do it. We can't we can't change thinking about that without going in and doing it. Another book is Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. This is not necessarily a creativity book, but it kind of is. It's all about embracing the not knowing. So we have this knowledge versus creativity that we're talking about here. And the Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind philosophy is really the deepest version of what we're talking about here with there's no right answers. There's nothing that you can do wrong. The kids who have the creative genius level is from not having any concept of what is the correct thing to do, which I've been talking about. So from an actual Zen master, I don't know how to pronounce his first name, Shunryu, maybe, Suzuki is his last name. So that book is very inspiring to just let go of preconceptions, let go of anything we already know, and know for the sake of creativity at least, you can try anything. And then lastly, there's this book, Creativity by, I forgot how to pronounce his name, but I did practice it. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Close. But this is a great author, also wrote a book called Flow. This book is called Creativity, the Psychology of Discovery and Invention. And big takeaway from this that I want to share is that creativity can be practiced, which is the very first thing I said in the video. It can be practiced. It can be developed and worked on. And to actually think of it as in the grouping of things that we're working on is important, right? So don't just have all of your scales, your songs, your repertoire, etc. Put creativity in there too if you need to work on it, right? Maybe you don't need to work on it and you're fine, but just know that you can really intentionally practice it with some of the methods that we're talking about here. It's just really cool to read about how the creative state of mind, first of all, how beneficial it is for us health-wise, for our brain. It's considered so healthy for the brain because according to brain scans, it's using, when you're in a creative mind state, you are using more of your brain and more connections in your brain than any other way of thinking. Okay, so here's a little quote from American Psychological Association about science behind creativity. The process seems to involve the coupling of disparate brain regions. Specifically, creativity often involves coordination between the cognitive control network. So not that we know what that is specifically, but just think of that as the rational brain. And then the cognitive control network, which is involved in executive functions such as planning and problem solving, and the default mode network, which is most active during mind wandering or daydreaming. So the interesting thing here as it goes on, it says the cooperation of those two networks in the brain may be a unique feature of creativity. These two systems are usually antagonistic. They rarely work together, but creativity seems to be the one instance where they do work together. That's kind of a cool final thing, a little bit of the actual brain science of it. And I've seen brain scans where they're showing here's prefrontal cortex logic problem solving, here's emotional thinking, here's this, and here's someone in what they determined was a creative state. And it was like totally lit up in connecting in this way. And what this piece of information that I just read is saying is that the creative state of mind is unique in that it's the one time that these two parts of the brain are connecting and talking to each other. Creativity is not one system, but many different mechanisms that under ideal circumstances work together in a seamless way. That's another quote from the article. So, hey, even just for like healthy aging and healthy brain and healthy life and healthy emotional balance. And it's like something specifically to work on. And none of us should ever feel resigned to, oh, I'm not a creative person. I mean, we all have that and we can actually work on it just like you can work on any other skill or any muscle. The bottom line is that it can be practiced. Force yourself to come up with anything, good or bad. It'll get better. That skill will get better. And just a quick comment about practicing music, because I talk so much about actual music skills and practicing on my YouTube channel. When I'm practicing a lot of music, I'm not thinking creatively at all. I'm literally trying to get a skill down. If I'm doing deliberate practice on a skill, I am much more in like Olympic training swimmer mode or something, right? Like that's not what you would think of as a creative act at all. I'm thinking of precision, repetition, trying to get something down. So it's a totally different world. The idea for me is that the combination of these worlds, the technical proficiency, the excellent practice habits, and the excellent creativity habits, when they come together, that can be unstoppable. That's kind of my thesis for life, if you will. I'll just say if our goal is to play music and not just practice music, It only is successful if we are being playful. It's the most playful thing you can do. It is playing. It is truly playing. It is the most fun thing in the whole world. I would say that I've been just chasing that since I was a kid doing it. It's the thing I look forward to the most. It's the thing that I want to do the most, is that exciting, exploring, playing. So if our goal is to actually play music and you are not being playful with your creativity, that is something absolutely to add into what you do and how you work on it. And just like everything else, be patient. Let it take time, be patient, and just watch it kind of happen little by little. If you are a guitarist and you don't have my chord chart called Chords with Color, you can download that for free. There's a link in the top of the description if you're watching on YouTube, or you can go to soundguitarlessons.com/chords with color. It's very relevant because this is a big chord chart that has a ton of chords through 5 different keys, but also multiple options for those chords. So you can get what are called the color tones, which are chord extensions, a bunch of unique ways to play a bunch of standard chords. So if you've played all the normal standard chords on the guitar, this has a bunch of alternate options that you can replace those, and that still works in a song or progression or whatever. As far as being creative goes, you can just take this chord chart, look at any random chord, play any of them in any order. Doesn't even matter if it's from different keys, and see what happens, right? Just see what happens. If you don't have another idea of what to do, that would be a great thing. Grab the chord chart, go look at him. It's just right in front of you. Play a random chord, try another one, go back and forth between those two. Boom, you're going to have a song idea. You're going to have something that you're coming up with to jam over, or whatever your kind of ideal thing is. It's a very unique chord chart, so I'd highly recommend getting it for many other reasons as well. soundguitarlessons.com/chords with color, all spelled out, or you can use the link in the top of the description if you're watching on YouTube. I post a new lesson video every single week on YouTube, and I post a podcast style episode like this now once a month. If you want something to watch next or more about this creativity stuff, I have a playlist. You can go to the playlist area and find the creativity topic playlist, and you'll see all my other videos are in there where I've talked about creativity. I haven't done one as deep as this before, but there's a lot of good stuff in there if you want to go deeper. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you in another lesson soon. Take care and happy creating.